Okay.
Well, what time is it? We'll give it a minute, but
Okay.
this might be us.
Thank you.
Okay.
Welcoming place.
Okay. Do I have a marker? Alright. So you can look over that. I kind of gave some of the answers, but I got our name tags.
Oh, great.
We'll see. I should have bought some.
Oh, this would be great for the fall festival too.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
So I can order more, or maybe we'll go through them, maybe not. But that's a great idea. That's exactly what we're talking about. This idea that there are other ways to make people feel welcomed and known than just being
Excuse me.
friendly or welcoming in the abstract. You know, there's maybe specific ways we can find to do that. And like with name tags, ways that
No, it didn't work. Oh, that's okay.
ways that might even seem a little silly at times. To those of us who know everyone's name, but
Yeah.
recognizing that not everyone does.
I remember years ago, I was at a church in Durham. It was a UMW meeting, and they had badges set up in the foyer there, and people picked up their badge and put it back in, and it was over with.
Well, yeah, so
That was years ago. I mean, you know, but
a lot of churches have that. The question is always, do people use them?
exactly.
It'll be easier if we can, if people latch onto this, we can get permanent ones made. The problem is continuing to get people to use them.
Right.
And in our church, one of the things we have to consider with all of this is how is it that people get in the building?
Yeah.
Because we can't just have a rack of name tags out here,
Yeah.
because some people do come in the front door and some people walk right by it. Now maybe right here you could get most people, and then that might be the spot, or maybe you just put it up front in the sanctuary. But that's sort of a space problem we have with welcoming anyone, is someone pulls up to the church, and you all have experienced this. Where should I park?
Yeah.
Can I park here? Can I park here? Church people know, well, we can just pull up out front, but those are handicapped, and they don't know if it's okay to sit on the lawn.
Right.
You park all the way back there, you got to walk all the way through the building.
And we have so many doors.
That
We
is
do.
honest
A
truth.
lot of times we see people who don't know trying to come in these side doors in the fellowship hall.
Yeah.
And, we upgraded the signage when I got here. I think it was before the pandemic. And it works if you pay attention to it. But the entrance problem is still a big one. We almost need, like, if you look at our website, I actually have a map to show where, the best parking place is and kind of outline that stuff. But, maybe we need other signs just in front of every door, like,
Yeah.
door A, I mean, maybe not even A, B, well, that might help
1,
someone
2,
a little
3
bit,
or
but,
something.
something to give that direction. I mean, stuff like this is just stuff we don't always think about. So, we're going to start where you should always start, which is with the Bible. This should be a familiar story. This is Genesis 18, 1 through 15. And what's really important is, Abraham has already sort of made promises to God, but this is like the key promise. This is like the moment, really. The Lord appeared to Abraham by the oaks of Mamre, as he sat at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. He looked up and saw 3 men standing near him. When he saw them, he ran from the tent entrance to meet them and bowed down to the ground. He said, "My Lord, if I find favor with you, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. Let me bring a little bread, that you may refresh yourselves, and after that you may pass on, since you have come to your servant." So they said, "Do as you have said." And Abraham hastened into the tent to Sarah and said, "Make ready quickly 3 measures of choice flour. Knead it and make cakes." Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf, tender and good, and gave it to the servant, who hastened to prepare it. Then he took curds and milk and the calf that he had prepared and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree while they ate. They said to him, "Where is your wife Sarah?" And he said, "There in the tent." Then one said, "I will surely return to you in due season, and your wife Sarah shall have a son." They've lived their lives
Yeah.
at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And Sarah was listening at the tent entrance behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in age. It had ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. So, which is always such a roundabout way to say that, but whatever. I wonder what the common English says. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "After I have grown old and my husband is old, shall I have pleasure?" The Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old?' Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? At the set time I will return to you in due season, and Sarah shall have a son." But Sarah denied, saying, "I did not laugh," for she was afraid. He said, "Oh yes, you did laugh." So we didn't need all that for what we're talking
And
about.
what woman wouldn't have?
Yeah,
True.
Particularly when she has no idea who these 3 guys are.
well, that's right. And yeah, there's a whole sermon in God's possibility far outside what we could ever think of, right? That's the thing that, it also, there's a Walter Brueggemann, I think in a sermon, he says, Sarah and Abraham are old, they're retired, they're all done, and God says, now it's time to paint the nursery.
Oh.
And I always thought that was such a good illustration because it is the possibility and the joy and the wonder, but it also is like, you've still got work to do, right? Which is, painting the nursery. It's like, oh, there's still work to do. Now, I don't know if all of us, yeah. So what do you notice about the way Abraham welcomes these guests?
Honestly, what I can't figure out is, it seems like to me, in order to make that kind of meal, it's going to take some time.
Yes.
So, did they know a quick way to cook this stuff, or were these guys hanging around all afternoon waiting for this meal?
Well, yeah, so they're making cakes. He's slaughtering a calf, and he takes cheese and milk. He's got this whole spread. I think part of this is when you greet a guest in the ancient world, you welcome them into your home, and it's something we've talked about before. If people are traveling, they're out there.
Mm-hmm.
And especially Abraham, they're out in the wilderness somewhere. If someone stops by, they're not just popping in to say hi.
That's right.
Like, they need somewhere to stay. So he's kind of, they probably sit and hang out for a while or something, I guess. Because, yeah, it's got to take several hours at least.
Yeah.
It's like making a Thanksgiving dinner, it's like you always prepare for days before. That's because you have already warning, but on that day, it's like, hello.
But it's certainly a generous meal.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Just making a hoe cake
Yeah.
would be nice.
And having a little bit of cheese or whatever.
That's
He's
right.
putting on a whole fancy dinner.
And, this is, it's sort of ahistorical, but we can do this. But, Abraham goes out and slaughters a calf to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And, where should that take you in your Christian mind? To the prodigal son, right? The father goes out and slaughters the calf. That's when his son comes back.
Yeah.
Right? Abraham is doing that for 3 strangers who walk up to him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe he has a guess that this is some kind of test or work of God, but he doesn't know. Maybe not. Probably not. I don't think
from
so.
what's
Yeah.
told there.
He just sees 3 strangers. So there is something to learn in the extravagance and the generosity that he's offering. But then what I also heard is he sat at the entrance of his tent and he looks up and saw 3 men standing near him.
They were right there.
When he saw them, he ran from the tent entrance to meet them, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's not waiting for them to come. Well, you can't knock on a tent door, but he's not waiting for them to come up and say, "Hey, can you give us something? We're out here in the wilderness."
Yeah.
He sees them and he runs out to meet them. He sort of goes out of his way to do all this stuff. He's the one who's making the effort, which is, whatever to the order I'm talking about, but is. I think implicitly, and I'm as guilty of this as everyone, you sort of think, well, we'll wait for someone to walk in the door and then we'll give them a great welcome. Well, how often is that going to happen? And what opportunities are you missing if we're not sort of, casting our nets a little wider, looking at, making those sorts of effort, certainly in church if someone shows up to get them in and help them find where they need to go, but also just in life. How do we seek to sort of welcome and invite people in this way? Just his sort of effort that he undertakes, I think, is huge to me. I know you all aren't looking at the text. Was there anything else you thought about?
Well, they already knew Sarah's name.
Well, yeah. So maybe at that point he's like, okay, something's going on here, and maybe while she's cooking the meal, they're sitting and talking. I don't know.
Yeah. But they say, "Where is your wife?"
Mm-hmm.
And then call Sarah by name.
And remember, they changed their name too, so it's not like
Mm-hmm.
and that's pretty recent. So,
That would be a pretty good clue, except he's already killed the calf.
Yeah.
And started the meal
That's right.
before that point.
And again, if we're talking about New Testament echoes, it is that same thing of, okay, maybe he knows these 3 people are God's way of appearing to him, but shouldn't you treat everyone like that's possible, right? That's the Matthew 25 where Jesus says, what you did to the least of these, you did to me, right? But I think there is sort of an ancient sense that you see this a lot throughout history. This idea of welcoming people and hospitality in your home is a big deal because there is this idea of you never know who someone is. And in history it could be like, this could be a ghost or a spirit or a god coming to visit you, like in Greek mythology, but it's also just, you never know how someone might be able to repay you. You shouldn't be working for it, but you should sort of treat everyone with that possibility.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first text that comes to my mind when we talk about this, but there's all sorts of texts we could think about in terms of generosity. You've got, some of the ones we did for food are huge. You all did shift, so they love to use the one where the guy's friends, tear open the roof and lower him down, or even a lot of those early miracles of Jesus, like Jesus goes to Peter's mother-in-law's house and heals her, and so you could talk about some of the ways Jesus invites himself into people's houses. You could talk about Zacchaeus. I mean, there's a million texts, but this is the first one I think of because it's like, here's some visitors. What do you do? So we'll come back to that. So then the framing question is again one you all have talked about before, but what do you do when someone's gonna come visit your house.
Clean.
Clean.
That's the
I mean,
very first, that's actually right.
I mean, that is huge.
Put stuff under the bed or whatever.
I mean, that
I
is
see.
number
Clean.
one.
Clean.
And there's
Yeah.
a reason for that. What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
You know,
And if you have time, you might want to go to the store and get some kind of refreshment.
yeah. Well, so
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
if we start with cleaning,
Yeah.
you know, why is that? Someone's not going to judge you. If someone's coming to your house, it's fine. But you kind of want to.
Oh, you assume they're going to judge you.
Well, yeah, that's part of the thing is, what are people going to see?
Yeah.
And when you start cleaning like that,
Mm-hmm.
it's a different level of clean than you keep for yourself. Like, at least for us, you know, we like to keep the house tidy. It's a disaster right now, of course. But things are much more put away, much more in place when someone's coming over. It's
Especially somebody you don't know well.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if it's your buddy, you might not care.
Yeah.
But if it's somebody who you don't know well at all, you want them not to come away with a terrible impression of you.
Yeah. Well, and there's like a negative aspect to that if you kind of want to be someone you're not, right? You want to portray.
Well, and if you're gonna serve food, you don't want them looking at your dirty house and saying, "Oh, I don't think I want to eat what they got."
That's exactly
Yeah.
right.
And so, you know, someone could, you know, the impulse to do this could be for the wrong reasons sometimes, or maybe, you know, but it also is kind of, you start to look at your house through someone else's eyes,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
That's the thing.
exactly.
What are they going to see when they walk in?
That's right.
Oh, I don't even notice that cobweb anymore. I decided to leave it because they'll catch the fruit flies or whatever. But you got to clean
I
that
have
up.
50 pieces of paper on my kitchen table right
Yeah,
now.
I mean,
Yes,
it's just stuff like that where it's like,
exactly.
oh, I didn't even think that's just where I
Yeah.
put that stuff,
Yeah.
but it just ends up piled up there.
Yeah.
And so seeing through someone else's eyes leads you to sort of do things in a different way. And that's, I mean, we talk about the church, the cleanup day, and some of the stuff you all did several years ago now with painting and stuff
Right.
is really important because
Right.
people notice the things that we're just used to not
Mhm.
Yeah.
paying attention to.
That's right.
And
When Pat and I walked around the building
Yes.
after we ate dinner last night, we were looking at places on the church that on the outside that need paint.
Paint and some repair.
well, the exterior, I mean, it
Some of
needs,
some of the wood's coming apart.
you know, paint or completely new exterior,
Yeah.
ideally,
Right,
'cause it
exactly.
just,
Well, we were looking at the shakes up there at
Yeah.
the top there
Yes.
that are peeling.
are those wood?
I think so.
So I don't know how well they'll take paint either.
And
at this
well,
don't know
and
now.
it's a long way up there.
Well,
it kind
yeah.
of, it's almost like it's dry rotted in a way.
Probably so.
It's possible, yeah.
All the rain and stuff we've had too that help.
But yeah, so that's the kind of stuff that you only see if you make a point to look at this point, right? Like, we're kind of used to it.
I saw a former member, it's probably been a couple months ago, and she asked me, she said, when are you going to paint the church? I said, I'm sorry, we can't paint the church. Church has had enough paint, we just can't, I mean, it's got to the stage where it won't accept paint. We'll have to redo the whole
I
thing.
mean, some of the, the
Yeah.
metal, the
Yeah.
metal shingles might, but I mean, that's
Yeah.
a big,
Yeah,
big
especially have to
job.
scrape off, and, I mean, you know, I'm thinking, whoop, hello.
but, you know,
Yeah.
it conveys a message. Even if the truth is we're, you know, focusing on other things and it's not really neglect as much as
Right.
practical, it's still, you know, it's sort of a message you have to contend with, or it's going to have to be dealt with.
That's right.
And it's the same thing, and you can see, I'm as guilty
You're a
of
little
this
toy
as
box.
anyone. Here's where I sit every Sunday morning, and so I got books and stuff for Ruby and whatever else.
Yeah.
It's not going to look good if someone comes in here for Sunday school. I mean, it might look lived in a good way. It might also look messy, because it is. But trying to keep things in order and try to see with those other eyes is really important. What else might you do if someone's coming over?
Cook something.
Yeah.
I mean, we always have to. We're Southerners. We have to
Yeah.
feed.
That's right. Cook, that's right.
And, you know,
Even if it's just cookies or something, you're gonna
Have some
want to
conversation.
offer them some kind of food.
yeah, you gotta offer people something.
That's
And, you know, it would be nice if we could do something like that week to week, but the problem is you put out stuff, if no one touches it for long enough, even if it's non-perishable, eventually it's old.
very much.
And making a pot of coffee every week for maybe 1 or 2 people to drink it, it just doesn't. But at the same time, that's another way of making someone feel at home, right? And so even if the practical one-to-one comparison maybe is just not feasible or necessary for us where we are, making someone feel like they're welcome, like they're at home, giving them something to nourish themselves. Even, we've usually got water in the fridge downstairs. You could say, "Do you need something to drink?" Right? Because someone, we'll talk about this too, but
Okay.
someone comes into the building, they don't know where the water fountain is if they need a drink, or they,
Well,
People
even
bring
I
water
would be
bottles
sure
now.
of that because when we had, I forgot, somebody's funeral, somebody asked for water.
Yeah.
And I went downstairs and got water and brought, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 of them back up here. And then found out later on that those were supposed to be Stone Soup water and I wasn't supposed to touch them.
down there. If it's down in that fridge, whatever.
That's right.
But
I'll tell you, like she's saying about the funeral thing, I think we ought to get the smaller bottles because half of the time they only drink half of it.
Yeah, they'll drink 2 or 3 sips and be.
well, sometimes we end up with those small bottles. I think they're usually left over from fall festival and stuff.
Some
that they're
place,
down there.
yeah, we've had.
But-
we need to get.
But though, just that kind of greeting and welcoming and is there what else might you do? Okay, what might you do once someone shows up?
Well,
Unexpectedly, you're saying?
No,
Look at my mess.
once they're there, what do you do?
welcome them.
Definitely. Well, most
I'm
generally.
so glad to see you.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, so you have to talk to them if it's your own house.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Um,
Most generally, when my daughter comes and son-in-law, they're always working on some kind of gadget that I can't get to work.
sure.
TV or something or whatever, but and then of course they play with my cat. But that's a side point.
But so
Yeah.
so what if someone has never been to your house before?
First of all, in my case, the door that I use that's across from my carport is my very back door to the back deck. But that's the easiest way to get in the house. It's more open, and so when somebody pulls in the driveway, I go outside
Yeah.
and bring them in by that door that I prefer. And anytime somebody comes to my front door or my side door, I know they don't know me.
It's the same way of being at the
Anybody who
apartment.
knows
Yeah.
me knows to come to the back deck.
So again, we can talk about feasibility, but big churches station people out in the parking lot,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, have you been here before? This is probably a good door to go in, or you can park right here, that's fine, let me help, And they usually, if they're doing things right, they have someone else to hand them off to and say, okay,
Yeah.
Carolyn's going to bring you inside.
Yep.
Now,
Now that is something that I started doing a long time ago with funerals.
mhm.
I
Yes.
try to put myself somewhere right in the edge of that
Yes.
hallway so that I can see people coming up or coming in this door and point them where they need to go.
Right.
Well, and again, this is a space challenge we have because if I'm waiting for someone to meet me at the church, I just end up walking up and down the hall
Door to door to
because
door.
you never know where they're going to show up.
Yeah.
But
That's it.
we need to talk about actually having greeters again, and you know,
You
it may
said that
be-
last Sunday.
I sure
practical-
did, especially that back door.
Yeah.
I mean, basically,
Um,
oh,
The
excuse me,
back
front
door that's the front door.
yeah, excuse me. Yeah,
even
I'm sorry.
even just having a few people who are usually here, because the thing is,
Yeah,
I'm running around. You all usually singing right before church, but someone who hasn't just knows I'm not going to take my seat until 11 o'clock to be out here.
Oh,
and,
yeah,
and it
somebody
may be
might-
once or
yeah.
twice, but you never know, and it's a different feeling. So yeah, I mean, bringing them in and looking out for people like that is huge. But then even just telling them, what entrance do you usually use, right? If I mean,
oh, no,
and then exits, and then yeah, well, I would usually come in here, or I would usually park over there. Oh, you parked over there, that's fine, but it might be easier for you next time to pull up right here, especially depending on, you know, if someone's in a wheelchair, we'd probably tell them,
side entrance.
drive in the alley, pull up, and then you can go park, or something like that. The other thing is, you'd show them around, or at least tell them where the bathroom is usually, right?
Yeah.
Bathrooms.
And that is, whenever we have someone visit, the first thing I say is, well, I say hello or whatever and ask their name. The bathroom's down this hall.
Yes.
No one's going to be surprised if you walk in front of the church. But what I say is, if you go out the door, usually they come in the front door.
Front door.
So if you go out that door and around to the ramp, it's a straight shot.
Yes. Oh,
And so you give people the ability to know where the bathroom is without walking in front of everyone, right? But that involves showing them where things are.
exactly.
I think Fred has actually been doing this, but I always tell this story. I was visiting several years ago, I was visiting my parents' church right when I sort of started, maybe I was in divinity school even. And they said, well, why don't you go early and you can talk to our pastor and visit and whatever, because I hadn't really seen him. And so I walked in, they had church, I don't know what time, I was probably an hour and a half before church. And I came in and I found him, he was in the bathrooms making sure they had the good toilet paper on the rolls. Like not the industrial
Yes.
scratchy
Yes,
one ply
nice,
stuff,
good
but
stuff.
making sure they had the nice stuff on the rolls. And I thought that is such a great example, I mean, literally, of something to do, but also just the mindset of what's going to make people feel comfortable. So I think there's other versions of that we might be able to find. I'm trying to think if there's other stuff you might do. You know, it depends on how far you want to extend the metaphor, but you might, if someone's visiting you, you might make more plans, right? You might follow up. You might do something like that, and I think that's something else we'll talk about. Is there anything else we can think of that this metaphor might draw out before we...
Well, in my case, when people come to my house, they have to have the tour of my stained glass pieces.
Oh, that's right,
That's
yeah.
true. Very true.
Well, and so,
Because every window in my house has a stained glass piece on it.
History. That's good.
and
I call it my gallery.
yeah, I mean,
That's good.
showing people something that's special, giving them something, you know, specific to connect to hear the story, and just a way to open the conversation. And
Well, it also lets them know a little bit about me,
Yeah.
something that is important to me.
And so we might do the same thing. I mean, you can say, well, the walls are pink, right?
Yeah.
Or you can talk about
Well,
that.
and that, I love telling people when they come in, have you seen our pink sanctuary?
Yeah.
Let me show you our pink
That's
sanctuary.
right. You know, things like that, and maybe, you know, there's probably other history you can talk about. Of course, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit, the piano was donated by a former governor, right? I mean, that's the story people tell.
Yeah.
Basically, if you show them a picture, the little history book, how the outside of the church had 2 stairwells.
Yeah, that's a great other one, that there was a men's and women's entrance
That's perfect.
back in the day.
Oh, I tell you, one thing I always remember is that hallway wasn't there when I came. It was a woman's bathroom.
Yeah,
And
it was.
I remember that. People say, "Really?"
Well, and even just some basic background of, well, you know, this part is the oldest part, and then we added on here and over there, and then the fellowship hall is back through there, and then telling someone about what the church does. You know, oh, we host this. The snack packs are downstairs. You know, stuff like this. Giving them some of that stuff too could be really important.
Well, a lot of people ask how old the church is.
Yes.
Going on 145. There was something else I was going to say about that.
And I've had several people just lately ask me, what color was the church before it was pink?
Wasn't it gray or was the green?
It was Swepsonville green.
I remember.
It was green before pink. It wasn't gray at any point.
I remember when the university in Chapel Hill had green. Everything was green. So they must have got the paint from Carol.
And well, no, the
It was the
Swepsonville,
mill.
the Swepsonville green came from the mill.
Really? Oh,
Yes.
yeah,
The
and then
mill
must
gave
have took
everyone
it down
the-
to Carolina.
That's why we call it Swepsonville green.
Swept green. I like that.
And it's part of the. The difficult thing is sometimes when I walk into church, if we do have someone visiting or a guest, I don't always know if someone's spoken to them yet. And I don't know if people are saying hello, if they don't want to overwhelm someone. It's sort of this difficult dynamic where it would be helpful. Well, it depends on the, if it's a family or if it's a single person or whatever, but giving them the rundown. The other thing we can talk about is running them through the bulletin. Here's what we do, we're doing this today, or, giving them the background there. I think at least making sure 1 or 2 people have come up, introduced themselves, and done the basic stuff is really important. And we don't necessarily have anyone whose job that is. Now, maybe that's good because it gives everyone the opportunity, but it also sometimes probably means it doesn't get done at all. So maybe, I wonder, we could think of some
And you're
people-
talking to the choir here.
Well, I know, that's, yeah. But, maybe we could ask, like, Dell is usually sitting in here early if he's here. There's a few other
And he
people.
has so recently been in that position
Yeah, that's right.
of being the new guy and figuring out that he was sitting in Kim's seat.
Back row.
Kim never said anything.
No, I know.
But he figured it out on his own.
Well, and we're going to talk about seats in a sec. So, actually, that's where I'm going to go next. So, when someone comes to worship, what do we want to happen? What is the ideal thing to happen? And the first thing is to make room for them or help them find a seat. As I point out constantly, the mass of the church is towards the back and towards that back door.
Yep.
Yes.
Either in that
exactly.
amen corner or especially that back corner, but even the back on the other side too.
Yes.
There are many reasons for that. People always sit at the back of the church because they're afraid of the preacher for some reason. But I think another reason is the first time you walk in through that door. Most of us don't use that door once we've been here for a while.
Right.
But the first time, so they're looking, where is the closest empty seat? That's, even though Dell had been here many years ago,
Yeah.
you walk in, well, that's a perfect seat. You walk in, that back corner right in the aisle, I can sneak right out, or where
Yeah.
Jessie May sits. That's Irene sat there for other reasons. Or sits there when she's here. And so what you have is, if you notice, people end up slowly moving up if someone shows up early because they're not as wedded to their seats as certain people.
Mhm.
But whether it's literal or figurative, I wonder if we shouldn't try to keep those seats clear in a
I think
perfect
you're
world.
right.
And,
That's
Exactly.
a good point.
and maybe we can't, and I know people are attached to their seats, and I want to honor that. I don't just want to make it a joke.
We are all creatures of habit.
Because, you know, and
I used to say Target Place every Sunday.
well, and, yeah, and
Yeah.
we want to honor that in the sense of Lee sits in that seat because that's where he sat with his grandmother. You know, I mean,
And
someone
they
sits
used
in
to
the seat.
fill that pew
Yeah.
up.
Someone sits in that seat because there's a spiritual connection to that particular place, and we want to honor that, and maybe make that part of the story too. Hopefully, you make room for someone if they sit in your seat and don't.
I don't think he would tell somebody they had to
No,
get up
and-
anymore,
and-
but he used to.
Well, and you know, it is what it is. Trying to honor that story, but I also think that maybe those back 2 rows should be clear. If you've been here long
Visitors,
enough,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and maybe even that front row of the amen corner. You know, I mean,
Oh yeah.
because that's, you know, that amen corner is not a bad place for someone to sit who's trying to be inconspicuous too.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's tough because people have those emotional connections. But someone should have somewhere to sit, and they shouldn't, you know, sort of be shuttled around.
And when you come in cold to a new place,
Yeah,
you do want to be inconspicuous.
that's right. And I think,
You don't want to be drawing a bunch of attention to yourself.
yeah, I don't. This is the difficult thing, is especially in a small church. I don't think you want masses of people coming up to anyone new who walks in the building, but you do want someone to have someone they know, have their name, you know, introduce themselves, and it might be uncomfortable, but it might be. Usually, if someone sits in that back corner, I think usually if Vicky and Doug are there, Vicky will say hi to them
Yes.
and sort of. But even someone just to be their sort of guide and helper, I think, is really important, and it's a tough thing. We talked about the geography and the space, giving someone, even if you don't take them on the whole tour, say, here's where the bathrooms are, you can go that way, or you can sneak out the back and go around if you need to. And then I think telling them, okay, well, here the choir's going to sing, and here we're going to stand and say this prayer, and then we're going to sing this song, and oh, when we pass the piece, everyone's going to stand up and move around and
Pandemonium.
yeah. Kind of giving people a little bit of that thing, telling someone your name. The other thing that we really need to make sure happens, and I can try to be better, but I think everyone needs to, is if they're willing, did you fill out the visitor log, or would you be willing to just put your name on this card? The cards are still there. They have the wrong address for the church on them, but they're still there. And even if someone doesn't want to put their, I mean, an address is okay, but just something where we can follow up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And the ideal is a church person writes them a card or calls them and not the preacher. But it just depends on the circumstances. But some way to say, hey, what's your name? You know, do you live around here? Would you mind just leaving your info? We're not going to, you know, bombard you with stuff, but we like to keep records of that. That follow-up is really important.
I like to. I know it was at Christmas time that when I saw a couple people came in for a Christmas program, Christmas Eve, and I asked them if they were local, and they said no, they weren't. But one couple did. They said, yeah, we were local, and one couple said no, they were from out of town. And I asked them where, and I always like that to ask them where, because it may be some location that I know something about, and you know, and one thing another. So
Well, yeah, and so we'll move on to sort of the invitation section. The other thing you can do is, this is why we try to have, we don't want to go overboard with announcements, but try to say, Fall Festival is November 2nd. We'd love you to show up. It's a big thing. You know, give them the rundown of that. Or, oh, we're having game night. You know, that would be a great thing. Or even invite them to something else we do. The trouble with this, and I've been as guilty of it as anyone, is we tend to invite people to the things we do. When I visited a church once, it was immediately the choir members, oh, you should come sing in the choir. Well,
Yeah.
most people, if you ask them that, they're...
Out the door.
It takes a while to get people into something as big a commitment as a choir.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
when we were walking yesterday, somebody from Stone Soup
Oh, yes.
came in and came out the door while we were right near her car. And I said we had just gotten out of chair yoga, and she said, I heard you did chair yoga. I said, you should come.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's, yeah, I mean, and just those invitations. So, certainly to someone who's visiting the church, those other connections are just other points of possibility or some ways for someone to follow up. Those are also great things to invite someone to, aside from come to church Sunday morning.
Mm-hmm.
Because for whatever reason, it is a big hurdle for some people. It can be intimidating, and also, for whatever reason, Sunday morning is just, people have trouble getting going on a Sunday morning if they're not in the habit.
Yeah.
For us, it's Sunday morning, this is what we do. For someone who that's their last day off before the week starts again,
Yeah.
if you're not in the habit of doing something Sunday morning, it is really hard.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say it's not worth it and all that stuff, but giving someone the other points of contact can be a different entry point, but that also means we have to be connected to those things and connecting those people to what we're doing.
That's how I came to this church. Was the accompanist was Rita, and I was looking for another church at the time because I came from Chapel Hill, and she said, because she was here at the time, and she said, "Come on up here." I said, "You might like it up here," and it turned out that I knew Ann Patterson. I knew her because we played golf and stuff together, and so everybody asked me. I said, "Well, how did you come here?" I said, "Well, I came through the back door because I came through the choir, and then came."
Well, but I think that's fairly common and has always been, and especially now, I think that's probably a more likely scenario, at least for some people. But we have to sort of, make those connections then. If we look at the list of things we might invite someone to, game night, fall festival, Sunday schools before church, chair yoga, choir, come sing in the cantata, snack packs, Meals on Wheels, help at Stone Soup.
Take them to lunch.
Well, yeah, I mean, so
I was waiting for you to say that one.
you can have a one-on-one certainly and say,
Yeah.
or especially after church, hey, we all, that's a lot less pressure than just come with me.
You're right.
And so I think you all have a benefit there if you're willing. If we think of that list, I don't know, are there things that are missing? Are there things it would be nice to have to invite someone to, or something, some kind of area, or that is not connected to that, or that we could use?
I mean, I like all the others, but I think game night is really, you get to see, I always say the other part of your church member, because they're relaxed and more, friendlier. Well, they're always friendly. This is the friendly church that come think about it. But it's just the idea if you say, hey, we got game night. How would you like to come? And, and stuff like that. That's a good opener
Well,
right there.
I think so. It depends on how frequently we're going to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
true about that.
You should always have one on the calendar then, if you think that's a good thing, right? Because right now,
Yeah, that's true.
Fall Festival's coming up, but
Right.
my inclination, as I think about it, is I think probably do one in December and like a Christmas party type.
Oh, that, yeah.
But we haven't, we don't have a date. We can't, you can't invite someone to something that's not
Exactly.
on the calendar.
Yeah.
Those are also quarterly. And so if one's just happened, if someone's relatively new saying 3 months from now we have this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, like I said, there's these other things. There's obvious stuff like it's tough to invite people to anything if they've got kids or 4 kids. We just haven't. There's a practical barrier to that.
Well, and the days are getting shorter now.
Yeah.
True.
It's getting dark much earlier.
I was talking to Sean. I mean, I would like to explore some kind of monthly, quarterly, like a service for kids. They have various names for them, but you wouldn't do it Sunday morning, you'd do it Saturday afternoon, Sunday after, sometime that might be a little easier if you're dragging kids somewhere. I also think, we've been doing these every month, and these, certainly depending on the topic, could be something someone might be interested in. In a perfect world, you would have some kind of weekday Bible study or like discipleship group of some kind. I don't know that. My thing has always been those of you who would probably come to that are already the people who are here all the time, and so I don't want to have another thing to throw you all into. But I think in a perfect world, if someone was willing to do that, a Tuesday or Thursday morning Bible study, I mean, is just could definitely. Although then you're eliminating anyone who works during the week, which is the other thing. But we do have, you have church calendar things too, cantata, Easter stuff, Lent stuff, Holy Week, things like that. Actually, well, we've seen they work really well because. Especially like Ash Wednesday, Lent, Easter time, and Christmas is when people start thinking, maybe it's time to try to go to church again. And we had, we had a couple people show up, for the cantata, and then come back on Christmas Eve, and kind of been around, not totally here all the time, but focusing our efforts on putting that stuff out can be really helpful too. Other thoughts on that? I want to spend some time on visibility, but the other thing is participation. I was thinking about this because Gary, to his credit, is willing to say something to someone and say, we need to use a microphone during this time, or, why do we do, not everyone is willing to be as upfront with that stuff as he is. And I keep thinking we need some way for the kind of couple people who are more relatively new to sort of get that feedback from them to ask for it.
Yeah.
Right?
He always catches me when I am walking back to get the candle lighter. And wants to talk about something, and I've got like 2 minutes I can maybe spare him.
Yeah.
He said to me last week, anytime you want me to just read something, I'll do that. And I'm thinking, okay, now can we make him a liturgist, or does he just want to read the scripture? And I didn't have time to ask him the full question.
Well, and that's where, I mean, with us, it's probably as simple as actually making the effort, myself and some of us, to say, hey, could we have lunch? Or whatever, and sort of elicit that feedback. You can certainly try to get someone in a leadership, but I almost wonder if, some kind of occasional, I don't know, if we could do like a town hall or a focus group or something and ask those people, but also other church people, and just say, hey, I don't know who would show up, but just try to get that input and that new perspective. Because that's the thing is, there were plenty of people who couldn't hear a thing that was happening during prayers.
Exactly.
And no one said anything.
I have trouble catching names to write the stuff down.
Exactly.
You can tell because of the number of times I write down something and put a question mark behind it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I got it right.
Yeah. But we're all just, well, this is how it is, and that's fine. I'll just, and I tried to give that back, but someone just needed to stand up and say, hey.
Right.
And there's other things too. I mean, it's, there's still work to be done, but Andy walked in and said, the piano sags a little bit, and what's going on with this? And
I've known that since I've been
Now,
here.
we had already told you
no,
that.
I know, no, we
And the
knew.
organ is too. I mean,
And it's still not fixed.
We knew,
Still-
and we've talked about stuff, and then it sits or you
Yeah,
get busy and stuff.
Well, we
But
didn't do anything about
the
that.
accessibility stuff.
corner.
That's exactly right.
Everything turns into, a small job turns into a bigger job, turns into
Mhm.
enough of a big job that you don't do anything.
Yeah. But I will say, they did go down and they at least did a lot of work sealing up the crawl space under there. That didn't necessarily fix that problem, but
Yeah.
was
Oh,
something.
okay.
But
Mhm.
there's other stuff where,
Mhm.
he was talking about the foundation here. Well, we need to pick a day and do that. Well, that's a lot,
Mhm.
and you kind of settle in and other stuff happens. And
Yeah.
but so getting that feedback, some kind of council feedback participation for those handful of people. I think I just would love to hear more. And I'm reminded every time we get new interns that they have the same thing where they see stuff that
Mhm.
I just don't see anymore.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
So some way of then, if you've invited someone and made some connections,
Right.
getting them involved in the process in some way, I think is important. The last thing I want to talk about is visibility. The truth is just that if you wait for people to Google the church and show up on Sunday, some people will, a lot won't, or won't, even if they're Googling it and thinking about it, making the extra effort to get here is the difficult thing. And so trying to find ways to increase visibility, increase exposure, and open up things that that might spur someone to decide to visit. I think the Fall Festival is and always has been one of those things where people, well, I'm comfortable walking into a church and buying some barbecue. I don't know how much of a sort of connectional evangelistic thing that's been, because all the church people are running around
We're all busy doing
busy
something.
and they're
Yes.
not necessarily making those connections. And that's where I said, and I don't know that it happened for various reasons, but if someone can't run around and be busy, plant them at a table, or just have them be the greeter of that event, or but it's always hard because there's always something happening.
Yeah.
So even that person ends up, well, can you do the cash, or can you, but
That's the reason why the bake sale is where it's located, because it's actually a welcoming center. Because
Yeah.
you're seeing people come right in there, and they'll say, "Well, is Kyle here?" And I say, "Back over in that corner right over there," or is the preacher here? And I said, "Well, he's out here somewhere."
yeah.
I mean,
Which,
just
I need to plant myself too, but the thing about that event is it's common to a lot of churches, it's something people are comfortable coming to, and it's something they can anticipate not being noticed at.
It's a
Right.
no pressure thing.
It's
That's
there is
exactly
no
right.
pressure to it because we're selling something, right?
Mhm.
And because there's a lot happening, so you're not, and that's why I think game night is a great fellowship thing. But game night, if someone's visiting church, it's again inviting them into the fellowship. Game night is probably not something someone who has never been here
right.
is going to come to. Because it's, well, I'm going to have to play a game with someone, right? Right? You know.
We did have one girl from the yoga class.
Mhm.
She came one time, bless her heart,
Sure.
and she enjoyed it.
But that's why, you know.
But
being-
she already had a relationship with us because she's been
Yeah,
going.
and she knew
coming
us.
to
That's
yoga
right.
class.
That's right.
But that's why bingo, you know, people can count on, well, I can just
Oh,
sit
yeah.
there and
yeah.
play bingo.
Exactly.
So if you wanted to do that, you have to think about the low pressure and the,
Mhm.
and that's where I do think, well, there's a lot of things, but I think there's a benefit to fundraisers for things
Mhm.
that we can also have an eye towards evangelism for. If you, well,
Right.
a meal for snack packs might still be too small,
Mm.
but you know, things like that that are benefiting something else, or big events like that. Even the yard sale is another thing like that. People know they can walk in and, well, it's a yard sale. Of course, I can just walk in here, and
Yeah, right.
I think there are some other things like that we could tap into.
Well, the one we did for the Methodist home, I was absolutely shameless. Every time anybody brought anything up to pay
Yeah.
for, I would say, "This is for the Methodist home for children. You want to throw in a couple extra dollars?"
Yeah.
Yeah. Round off that figure.
And you know, you're sort of doing this implicitly, but say, you know, we're really passionate about the work they do in the community, about, you know, I mean, you're communicating something about the church with that, hopefully. I think things like that, I think, you know, service opportunities like we have are great, but they involve usually smaller groups of people that can be intimidating. And that's where I don't totally know the answer. I think if we had had a few more resources, but I think some of the like hurricane relief events could be really good for that, because it's just come to
I was
this.
just thinking, I know
You
we
know.
had not said we were going to do the 10% or anything from the fall festival, but to do
A little
hurricane
bit to
relief,
Encore or
Encore,
something.
something to Encore,
Yes.
I think would be a good thing to do.
Certainly putting it out there, yeah.
Well, I did see the Salvation Army advertisement yesterday on TV.
So I think
Yeah.
thinking along those lines of low pressure events like that are really important. But so thinking about what they might be, but then also making it our responsibility to practice some of these welcoming things at those events, right? Even if it is just, you know, at the yard sale, throwing the projector up and putting other church stuff up on it and the worship time and stuff, right? I mean, stuff like that,
Exactly.
where people just, you never know, but just having that little bit of extra, that Abraham rushing out to the people, right? That little extra motion, it's really unnatural, it's really hard, but I think that. But then the other thing is, and there's, I mean, Music on the Lawn is a great example of that I think was great, even if it, you know, the attendance wasn't as huge as I think some people hoped. Still a great thing, and if you can, you know, keep doing it consistently, you never know. But I think it's the right mindset, whether or not all the spaghetti sticks to the wall or not. Music, lawn, you don't even have to come in the building.
Yeah.
That's right.
Come sit here. I mean, other things like that. But then I think the other end of that, and this is straight from Shift, is you can't just expect people to come to your stuff if you post it on Facebook and post the flyers.
Yeah.
Right.
There
Exactly.
need to be efforts to be out places, at things, you know, and we do it at Swepsonville Day. I think that's
Oh,
a
yeah.
great example of things we do, and like hopefully the pumpkin thing, if we can get a banner out and get a few people there, who knows, you know, you never know what's gonna happen. But like I was looking, this again might be too much for us, but Graham does their big Halloween thing. I think it's the 23rd this year. And it's like trunk or treat, but it's the whole square and all sorts of businesses and stuff go there.
That's a neat idea.
That's such a huge event, and it's like you got to be running through people because the people line up and there's big lines and it's busy. So I don't know if that's the thing, but they had a fall festival down there the other day. Now that they didn't shut down the street, and so it was harder. But there were crafters and vendors and people sitting out doing face painting and whatever else.
Wish we'd have known about that one because Sean's looking for somebody for the.
Well, yeah, I didn't even think of who it was, but
Okay.
you know, and it's not just that. There's other, you know, Safe is doing this barbecue music event down there. Trying to be present at things like that, you know, and not every one of these things is the answer, but trying to be out places. The problem we have is, aside from the stuff at the farmer's market, those things don't happen in Swepsonville. And so you go to Graham and do it, you're a block away from a different Methodist church. And so are you kind of
And that's a
entering
lot
that
bigger than
territory?
we are.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with the Safe event. I'm sure they'd be happy to have us, and we have no ill will towards the Saxapahaw Methodist, but that's like sort of their area, and they're connected to Safe directly, and so no one would mind, but it is kind of us stepping a little past the point of just in our community.
Well, and there are relatively few of us.
Well, and that's the other piece. I'm
There's a
saying-
lot of the
yeah.
same people doing everything.
That's right. I mean, and so, I mean, we have to be realistic. That's the difficult thing is saying, well, we do this and this and that, but it's who's doing it.
Exactly right.
It's getting harder and harder
yeah.
for me to find a slot I can put anything else in.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So it's the truth is, I think there are a lot of good things, and maybe we're at capacity with these things, and it might just be. I mean, I'm putting that out there to think in the ways this works, right?
Well,
Less
I'm
than we need to-
thinking some of this that we're talking about, all this welcoming stuff, is there are some people sitting in the pew who are not doing anything that we need to be inviting them to get more
Well,
involved.
that is exactly right. Can we invite some other people to participate in these things, to take a role in these things, or, you know, my hope with this was if you could have this conversation with a few people who aren't always sitting in educational, you know, this stuff I do, you could maybe reach more ears. You know, maybe it's building some of this more into the sermon series might just have to happen for that.
Yeah. Well,
That's right.
I'm taking it as a victory that Bonnie and Phil
Yes.
are going to do Meals on Wheels next week.
Yeah, I mean, I think all that stuff is.
And I think once they do it one time, they'll be interested in committing to it.
Yeah, and yeah, I think the key is you have to do what you can do with what you've got, right?
There you go.
To put it in kind of a roundabout way, and I think we are. I just think simple stuff like name tags at the fall festival, at this other stuff.
That's great.
I mean, little things like that, I think, are maybe the strides we need to start to make more than. I'm putting this stuff out there, but more than we need to plan a whole new event.
Right.
How can we take what we have
Yes.
Yes.
and bring a sort of welcoming eye to it? Think in terms of how do we actually get to know all these people we're coming in contact with?
And I think the first time we do this, we're going to have to do more than just leave the stickers out there and think people are going to do it for themselves. Somebody's going to have to be in charge of it and is going to write those things and hand them to you and say,
There you go. Yeah.
put this
And-
on.
That's right.
And I think doing it in worship, hopefully a couple times, at least this month, will hopefully reinforce how useful it can be.
Yeah.
I think maybe the more realistic end for us for it is not every Sunday in worship we put a sticker on, but game night, fall festival, yard sale, we do put name tags on the church people.
Yes.
Even something like that, I think, could be like just little things like that. That's where we need to.
I am making a badge. Kim asked me, and it says, "Ask me."
Yeah.
And I think, okay, we got the "Ask me" and your name right here on there. Pat, what can I do?
Exactly right.
So, got that already worked out.
Exactly right. Other thoughts? Anything else? Worked out pretty well with timing.
Yes, because I have to go.
Okay. Okay.
I have a man coming to look at my furnace.
Oh, no, that's important.
Yeah.
I should turn our heat on just to see.
Oh, hello. What was I going to say? Okay, we're finished here. Are you finished with this?
Yeah,
I just want-
you have fun.
Okay, the reason I was saying is that I am putting a flyer into the bulletin. Sean wants to make sure that something about the auction, and I'm doing something about the bake sale.
Okay.
So we don't have to do a lot of yakking.
Sure, yeah.
I guess you could.
Okay. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for the way you have welcomed us, the way you have made eternal life a home for all in Christ. We ask that we might extend the same warmth and have our minds transformed to see with others' eyes, that we might welcome people into your loving care and into the fellowship of this church. And we pray this in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. I like this. Oh,
Maybe you'll have more people tonight.
Maybe.